It was an unusually cold evening for this time of year. The city streets were lined with lights that twinkled brightly, but the chill in the air made it feel like winter had arrived early. The restaurant owner had just finished his last order for the night, his feet tired from hours of standing. He was locking up his small diner as he did every evening, when he noticed something strange out of the corner of his eye. A woman, elderly and frail-looking, was standing at the edge of the restaurant, clutching the hand of a small child. The woman's coat, though thick, looked worn and dirty. The little girl beside her was bundled up in a mismatched scarf and coat, her face pale and drawn. The pair seemed out of place on such a cold night. The woman's eyes were tired and the child was quiet, holding onto her side as if afraid to speak or ask for help. The restaurant owner paused for a moment, a bit unsure. He had seen people on the streets before, often those without a place to stay, but he had never seen anyone who looked so desperate. His diner was a small place, just enough for a handful of tables and a cozy kitchen in the back. He wasn't sure if he should help. After all, it wasn't his responsibility. He had bills to pay, customers to serve, and his own life to take care of. But as he stood there, locking the door and staring at the woman and child, something tugged at his heart. The wind howled through the streets, and the woman looked as if she might collapse from the cold. Without thinking too much about it, the owner walked over to the door and unlocked it, peering out at them. "You okay?" he asked softly. The woman looked up, startled. She seemed to hesitate for a moment before replying in a voice that was shaky, as though she hadn't spoken much in a long time. We're just looking for somewhere warm," she said quietly. "It's been a long night." The child clung to her side, glancing up at the man with wide, cautious eyes. The owner could see that they had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. He hesitated, but only for a moment. "Come inside," he said, pushing the door open wider. The woman looked surprised but grateful. She nodded and stepped inside with the little girl, who clung to her mother's side like a shadow. The warmth of the restaurant was immediate, and the owner could see the relief on their faces as the heat hit them. The woman lowered herself into a booth, still holding the child close. The girl, now seated, tucked her hands into her lap and stared down at the table, clearly exhausted. The owner took a moment to look at them both, the room feeling much quieter than before. "I can make you some food if you're hungry," he said, his voice gentle. "But you can stay here as long as you need. It's not much, but it's warm." The woman smiled weakly, her face full of gratitude. "Thank you. We don't want to be a bother, but we've been out there for so long, just trying to find somewhere safe." The owner nodded, understanding more than she realized. "No bother," he assured her. "It's no trouble at all." As he moved into the kitchen to prepare something warm for them, he couldn't help but wonder how they had ended up in such a dire situation. The little girl had a quiet strength about her, even though her face seemed so tired. He wondered where they had come from and why they had nowhere to go. There were always stories of people falling on hard times, but the owner hadn't really known anyone in his own life who had experienced something like this firsthand. He made some soup and a simple sandwich, something that could be prepared quickly, and then brought it out to the woman and child. They sat together, quietly eating, the warm food seeming to comfort them both in a way the owner couldn't quite explain. As he watched them, he found himself thinking about his own life. He had worked hard to build his small diner from the ground up, to make a living and survive. But here, in front of him, was a reminder of how quickly things could change. One moment everything could be fine, and the next it could all slip away. The restaurant owner had a feeling that this woman and child had lost everything, and it didn't seem fair. Life was unpredictable in that way. The woman seemed to relax a little as she ate, though the worry never fully left her face. She caught the owner's eye for a moment and gave him a small smile, almost as if she were too tired to say much more. The little girl, still silent, occasionally glanced up, her eyes meeting his. It was hard to tell if she was afraid or just trying to make sense of the situation, but the owner could see that she was a lot stronger than she appeared. It wasn't long before the restaurant owner brought them a blanket and some pillows. "You can stay here tonight," he said again, his tone more certain now. "Just until things get better for you." The woman nodded again, her tired eyes filled with gratitude. "You don't know what this means," she whispered. "We've been on the streets for days and no one's offered us anything." The restaurant owner nodded, though he didn't have much to say in reply. He could feel the weight of her words. There were so many people in the world who were struggling, and so few who seemed to offer kindness without expecting anything in return. It was easy to ignore people who were in need. But something inside him, something he couldn't quite explain, made him feel as if helping them tonight wasn't just the right thing to do. It was what he needed to do. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way the little girl looked at him, or maybe it was just the kindness in the woman's tired face. Whatever it was, he knew that letting them stay for just one night wasn't a big sacrifice, but to them, it could mean everything. As the night went on and the cold continued to bite at the windows, the owner felt a sense of peace he hadn't expected. There was something simple and good about giving someone a place to rest when they had nowhere else to go. It didn't feel like much, but it was something. And in a world that could be so harsh, he realized that sometimes that was all a person needed to change their life. The next morning arrived slowly, as though the city was reluctant to let go of the cold that had gripped it overnight. The restaurant owner had awoken early, as he always did, to prepare for the busy day ahead. But today something felt different. His routine seemed distant, and his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman and her granddaughter, who had stayed in his restaurant the night before. He walked into the main dining area, where the warmth from the previous night's meal still hung in the air, and found them both still asleep. The woman had curled up in one of the booths, her head resting against the table. The little girl, somehow more fragile than he had initially noticed, was lying across the booth next to her, covered by the blanket the owner had given them. The sight tugged at his heart. He had let them stay, sure, but now that the morning light revealed their exhaustion, it was harder to ignore the deep weariness that seemed to hang over them. The woman's face was soft with sleep, but there was a tension in her brow, as though the weight of the world was still pressing down on her, even in her dreams. The little girl, too, had a sadness about her, one that came from not just physical tiredness, but perhaps from something deeper, something the owner couldn't quite place. The owner moved quietly around the room, trying not to disturb them. He began preparing coffee for himself, his thoughts still lingering on their story. What kind of life had they lived before this? How had they ended up on the streets with nowhere to go? These questions circled in his mind like a storm, but he didn't have the answers. All he knew was that something about them felt different from the usual people who came into his restaurant, and he couldn't quite shake the feeling that their visit wasn't just a coincidence. He glanced over at the sleeping figures one more time, then decided to let them rest. He had no intention of rushing them. Instead, he busied himself with small tasks, preparing ingredients for the day's menu, wiping down counters, and making sure everything was in order for when the restaurant would officially open. But in the back of his mind, he kept thinking about the woman's quiet gratitude from the night before, and the way the little girl had looked at him. It wasn't long before the soft sound of the woman stirring broke through the quiet. She woke slowly, stretching her stiff limbs as she blinked against the morning light. Her eyes looked around the restaurant, confused for a moment, before they landed on the owner. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little raspy, as though it hadn't been used in a while. The owner smiled back, though he couldn't hide the concern in his eyes. "Good morning," he replied. "How did you sleep?" The woman sat up slowly, glancing at the little girl who was still curled up in the booth. She seemed to hesitate before responding. "Better than we have in a long time," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting us stay." The owner nodded, walking over to pour her a cup of coffee. He handed it to her, and she took it gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around the warm mug. There was a long silence between them as she sipped the drink, trying to gather her thoughts. "I'm sorry about last night," she said eventually, her voice softer now. "I didn't mean to impose on you. It's just, we've been on the streets for days and it's so hard to find a place to rest. I didn't know where else to turn." The owner leaned against the counter, his gaze steady but compassionate. "You don't need to apologize," he said, his voice calm. "No one should have to sleep on the streets. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Her eyes filled with gratitude again, and for a brief moment the weariness seemed to lift from her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to us." The restaurant owner nodded, unsure of what else to say. He wasn't one to dwell on emotions, but he could sense the heaviness that the woman carried. It was in the way she held herself, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held the mug. She wasn't just grateful for the warm meal or the bed for the night. It was something deeper, something the owner couldn't quite put into words. As they sat in silence, the little girl finally stirred, rubbing her eyes and stretching her arms. She glanced up at the owner, her expression guarded but curious. The owner smiled at her gently, trying to offer some reassurance. "Good morning," he said softly. The girl blinked, not quite sure what to make of the stranger, but after a moment she managed a small shy smile and whispered, "Morning." The owner felt a pang of sympathy for the girl. She was so young, and yet she seemed older in the way she carried herself. Her eyes, though filled with innocence, also held a deep sadness. It was clear she had seen too much for someone her age. "Are you hungry?" the owner asked, hoping to distract her from the sadness in her gaze. The little girl nodded, her hands still clutching the edges of her blanket tightly. The owner quickly prepared some breakfast for both of them, simple but comforting, scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. He set the plates down in front of them, and the woman and child both looked at the food with quiet gratitude. As they ate, the owner couldn't help but ask, "Where are you from? How did you end up on the streets?" The woman paused, clearly not expecting the question. She lowered her eyes to her plate as if gathering her thoughts before answering. "We didn't mean for things to turn out like this," she began slowly. "I used to have a good job, a steady income. But then a series of bad things happened. My company downsized and I was let go. After that, it was hard. I couldn't find work and things started to fall apart. My savings ran out and before I knew it, I was on the streets with her." The woman gestured toward the little girl who was picking at her food quietly. The owner could feel the weight of her words. He could hear the shame in her voice, even though she tried to hide it. "We've been trying to survive," the woman continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Every day is a struggle. I do whatever I can to find food and shelter, but it's hard. So hard." The owner stood still, listening to her words carefully. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't equipped to fix her problems, but there was something in his heart that told him he had to help. He wasn't a charity. He was just a man trying to run a small restaurant. But for some reason, he couldn't walk away from their pain. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, unsure of how else to respond. "I wish there was more I could do." The woman gave him a small, tired smile. "You're doing more than you know," she said softly. The restaurant owner stood there for a long moment, watching them both. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. How could he possibly help them beyond just this one night? Was there more he could do? But as he stood there, watching them eat their breakfast, something inside him told him that the simple act of kindness he had shown the night before was just the beginning of something much bigger. He didn't know it yet, but that one decision, the decision to open the door and offer them warmth for a night, was about to change everything. As the day went on, the restaurant owner found himself thinking more and more about the woman and her granddaughter. He had always been a man of routine. Open the diner, serve the customers, clean up, and close. But today it felt different. He couldn't shake the image of them, sitting quietly in the corner booth, eating their breakfast like it was the first meal they had had in days. The sadness in their eyes stayed with him, gnawing at him long after they had finished eating. It wasn't that he was used to seeing people in need. He had always tried to help when he could, offering discounts to those who couldn't afford a full meal or giving away leftovers at the end of the night. But something about these two, this elderly woman and her granddaughter, felt different. Their situation seemed to carry more weight than he could understand, and it made him wonder how he could help in a way that went beyond just offering a meal or a night's shelter. As the hours passed, he found himself restless, unable to focus on the usual tasks that filled his day. The usual rhythm of running a diner, the sizzle of the grill, the clink of dishes being washed, the hum of conversation from customers, was background noise now. His thoughts kept circling back to the woman's story. She had been a businesswoman once, he recalled. She had worked hard, built a career, and had a life she was proud of. But now she was here, sitting in his restaurant with nothing but a few bags and a tired look in her eyes. How had it all gone so wrong? He didn't have the answers, but what he did know was that he couldn't let them go without offering more than just kindness. They needed something more. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but the decision to help them felt stronger now, more urgent. Late in the afternoon, after the lunch rush had died down and the diner was quieter, the woman approached the counter. She looked uncertain, as if she didn't want to impose further, but the owner could see the look in her eyes, the same one he had seen when she had spoken the night before. There was a vulnerability in her that she couldn't hide, and something told him that she had been carrying that vulnerability for a long time. "I've been thinking," the woman began, her voice soft but steady. "I don't want to be a burden. I know I've already asked a lot from you." The restaurant owner shook his head quickly. "You're not a burden," he said. "I'm happy to help." She smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness," she said, "but I have a favor to ask. It's a bit unusual." The owner leaned forward, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "Anything," he said. "What do you need?" The woman hesitated for a moment, her fingers twisting together nervously. "I have a contact, a person who might be able to help us get back on our feet, but I don't have a way to reach them. I don't have a phone, and I don't know how to get in touch with them. I was hoping you might know someone who could help." The owner was quiet for a moment, considering her words. He didn't know much about her contact or what kind of help they might be able to provide, but he couldn't ignore the desperate hope in her eyes. "I can try," he said after a moment. "I don't know anyone off the top of my head, but I can ask around. Maybe there's someone who could point you in the right direction." The woman's face softened in relief, and for the first time since they had arrived, she seemed to relax a little. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to us." The owner nodded, though a part of him wasn't sure he could do much to help. He knew how hard it was to get out of a situation like theirs. People didn't just fall through the cracks. They slipped through slowly, until there was nothing left to hold on to. He wasn't sure what kind of miracle the woman was hoping for, but he wanted to believe there was something out there that could help her. As the evening rolled around, the woman and her granddaughter prepared to leave. They didn't have much to carry, just a few old bags and the hope that someone, somewhere, might be able to help. But as they walked toward the door, the woman paused and turned to the owner. "Before we go, there's something I want to give you," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. The restaurant owner raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Give me something?" he asked. The woman nodded and reached into her bag, pulling out a small yellowed envelope. She handed it to him with care, her fingers trembling slightly as she passed it over. The envelope was plain, with no markings, but it felt heavier than he expected. He looked at her, confused. "I don't know if this will mean anything to you," she said, "but I wanted to give it to you anyway. It's something I've kept for years. A letter from someone who believed in me when no one else did." The owner took the envelope, feeling a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. He didn't know what it contained, but he could see that this letter was important to the woman. It was something she had held on to for a long time. "Even through the hardest of times, thank you," he said, though he didn't know exactly what he was thanking her for. The woman gave him a small smile, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. "If you ever need to know why I'm so grateful, just read it," she said softly. "It might not change anything, but it might help you understand." With that, she turned, and with the little girl holding tightly to her side, they walked out into the fading light of the evening. The owner stood there for a long moment, staring down at the envelope in his hands. It was strange, this little gesture. She had given him something without asking for anything in return, as if her gratitude had to be expressed in this small, personal way. He wasn't sure what to do with it, but something inside him told him to hold on to it. For whatever reason, it felt like it would matter later. When the dinner rush began, the owner tucked the envelope into his pocket and went about his work. He couldn't help but notice that his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman and her granddaughter, wondering where they were now, and if they had found what they needed. Later that night, after the last customers had left and the restaurant was quiet again, the owner sat down at the counter. He pulled out the envelope, now a little crumpled from the day's activities, and carefully opened it. Inside there was a single piece of paper, faded and well-worn from years of being kept in a bag. The letter was brief, but it was clear that it had meant a great deal to her. The letter was from a local business group, a company that worked with small businesses to help them grow and succeed. It was an offer to partner with her, something she had obviously wanted but never been able to act on. The offer was a lifeline, a chance for a fresh start, and it had come just before everything had begun to fall apart for her. The owner stared at the letter for a long time, his mind racing. This wasn't just some random letter. This was the key to her past, to her life before everything had gone wrong. It wasn't just a token of thanks. It was a reminder of who she had been, of what she had once had. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the start of something new for her. As the restaurant owner sat there, A strange feeling washed over him. Something told him that this letter and the woman's story were far from over. The days that followed the woman's visit were busy, as they always were for the restaurant owner. His small diner had a steady stream of customers, and he found himself getting lost in his usual routine. But even amidst the constant activity, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in his life had shifted. It was as if the woman and her granddaughter had left an imprint on him, one that lingered long after they had gone. Every time the door opened, he found himself glancing up, half expecting to see them walk in again. But they never did. For a week, the owner thought about them constantly. He had taken the envelope with the business offer from the woman's past, and though he hadn't yet done anything with it, he couldn't stop thinking about what it might mean for her. The woman had been so desperate for a way out, but it seemed like she had already had a chance once. She had been someone important once, someone with connections and opportunities, but somehow, everything had slipped away. How had she lost it all? And then one afternoon the phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but for some reason he answered it anyway. The voice on the other end was a woman's, calm, professional, but warm. "Hello, is this the owner of the diner on Maple Street?" the voice asked. "Yes, that's me," the owner replied, curious. "How can I help you?" "I'm calling about a letter I received," the woman continued. "It's regarding a business partnership opportunity. I believe it was passed along by someone you know." The restaurant owner's heart skipped a beat. He instantly knew who she was talking about. "It's about the letter from the local business group," he said, his voice tinged with surprise. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how to get in touch with you. The woman who gave me the letter, she was here a week ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see," the woman said slowly. "Well, the letter was meant for you. It seems you've been recommended for an exciting partnership opportunity. We've been looking for someone just like you to work with. Your restaurant has great potential, and we'd like to discuss the details." The owner could hardly believe what he was hearing. It was as if all of the pieces of the puzzle were suddenly falling into place. He had never expected anything like this. But here it was, a real opportunity. One that could change everything for him and for the woman who had left him the letter. "I don't know what to say," the owner responded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never expected this. I didn't even know if it was real." "It's very real," the woman on the other end of the phone assured him. "We've been looking for someone with your kind of passion, your dedication to quality. We think you could really benefit from this partnership. We'd like to meet with you and discuss the details." The restaurant owner was in shock. He had always been so focused on keeping his diner running that he had never considered expanding or partnering with anyone, but now, it seemed as though everything was falling into place. He could hardly believe his luck. He agreed to meet with the woman, setting up a time to discuss the partnership. As soon as the call ended, he sat in silence, trying to process everything that had just happened. He picked up the envelope again, staring at it. The letter had come from someone who had believed in the woman when no one else did. And now it seemed like that belief was coming full circle, not just for her, but for him as well. The days leading up to the meeting were a blur of activity. The restaurant owner spent hours researching the business group, trying to prepare for the conversation that would shape his future. He didn't know what to expect, but he felt a nervous excitement build up inside him. He had never been in a situation like this before. But he knew one thing: this was his chance. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the one that could take his small diner and turn it into something much bigger. On the day of the meeting, he arrived early, pacing around his restaurant as he prepared himself. He had been through the motions of running his diner countless times, but this meeting felt different. This wasn't about serving food or cleaning tables. It was about the future. It was about the direction his life could take. When the woman from the business group arrived, she was polite but no nonsense. She had the air of someone who was used to making decisions and getting things done. The restaurant owner greeted her warmly, but there was still a sense of apprehension in his chest. They sat down together, and the woman began to speak, outlining the details of the partnership. The more she spoke, the more the owner realized just how much this could change things for him. The opportunity was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The business group wanted to help him grow his restaurant, to expand it into new areas and to turn it into a brand that people would recognize and respect. It was everything he had dreamed of but never thought possible. As the meeting continued, the owner couldn't help but think about the woman who had given him the letter. It seemed almost unreal that one small act of kindness had led to something so big. He had given her a place to stay for one night, and in return, she had given him the chance of a lifetime. It was almost as if fate had brought them together for a reason. At the end of the meeting, the woman from the business group offered her hand. "We're excited about this partnership," she said, her smile genuine. "We think this could be the start of something great." The restaurant owner shook her hand, his mind still spinning. "I can't believe this is happening," he said almost to himself. The woman laughed softly. "It's happening because you're ready. You've worked hard and now it's time for the next step." As she left, the owner stood in the middle of his restaurant, taking a deep breath. His life had just changed. The future that had once seemed uncertain and full of struggle now felt full of possibility. It was an overwhelming feeling, but one that he welcomed. In the days that followed, the partnership began to take shape. The business group helped him with everything: branding, marketing, expansion plans, and more. They connected him with suppliers, investors, and experts who could help turn his dream into a reality. It wasn't easy, but every step of the process felt like it was moving him closer to something bigger than he had ever imagined. But as his business began to grow, the restaurant owner never forgot the woman who had started it all. She had given him more than just a letter, she had given him hope. And though he didn't know exactly where she was now, he knew that her kindness had changed his life forever. One evening, as he sat in the now bustling restaurant, the owner looked up at the door, half expecting to see her walk in. He hadn't seen her since that night, and he often wondered what had become of her. But even if she never came back, he knew one thing for certain. He had been given a chance that might never have come if it weren't for her. With a small smile, the owner turned back to his work. Life had a funny way of surprising people, and sometimes it only took one small act of kindness to change everything. Weeks passed, and the restaurant owner's life continued to transform in ways he had never imagined. The partnership with the business group had opened doors that he had only ever dreamed of. His small diner, once a quiet, humble place, was now bustling with new opportunities. The help and support from the group had given him the tools to expand his business, build a brand, and even consider opening new locations. It was everything he had worked for, but it felt like it had all happened so fast. But as his business grew, something else was happening. The more successful he became, the more he found himself reflecting on the woman and her granddaughter. He still thought about them often, wondering where they were, what they were doing, and if they had found their own way to rebuild their lives. He had given them shelter for one night, and in return, they had given him the opportunity of a lifetime. It didn't seem fair that he had benefited so much, and yet they had disappeared from his life so quickly. He felt a deep sense of gratitude toward them, especially the woman who had trusted him enough to give him that letter, the key that had unlocked everything for him. It was as if fate had somehow aligned their paths, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more for them. One evening, as he was sitting at his desk, reviewing some business plans and marketing strategies, the door to his restaurant opened. He looked up, half expecting to see one of his regular customers, but instead he saw a familiar face. It was the same woman who had stayed in his restaurant all those weeks ago, the one who had given him the letter. She looked a little different now. Her face was still weary, but there was something new in her eyes, a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. She was no longer in the same tattered clothes, and her posture was more confident. The little girl, now holding her hand, looked around the restaurant with wide, curious eyes. The restaurant owner stood up quickly, surprised and unsure of what to say. He hadn't expected to see them again. After all this time, he wasn't sure what had brought them back. "Hi," the woman said, her voice warm but cautious. "We've been meaning to come back and thank you. I'm not sure if you remember us." "Of course I remember you," the owner replied, his voice filled with surprise and relief. "I can't believe you're here. How have you been?" How did you find me?" The woman smiled, a little embarrassed. "It wasn't easy. After everything, we were trying to get back on our feet. But we heard about your restaurant's success, and we wanted to come and see for ourselves." The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, and the woman bent down to whisper something to her. Then, turning back to the owner, she said, "We've been doing better. Not everything is fixed, but we've found some stability." The restaurant owner nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. It was clear they had made progress, and he couldn't help but feel proud of them, even though he hadn't played a direct role in their recovery. "I'm so glad to hear that," he said, smiling warmly. You've both been through so much, and it's amazing to see you doing better. The woman's smile grew a little brighter. Thank you. I know it seems like we disappeared, but we never forgot about you. The night you let us stay, it really changed things for us. It gave us hope. And I don't know if we would have made it without that. The restaurant owner felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized how much his small act of kindness had meant to them. He had simply opened his doors to them, offering warmth and food for one night. But it had turned into something more. I just did what anyone would have done, he said softly, though deep down he knew that what he had done had been more than just a small favor. It had been the beginning of something much bigger. The woman hesitated for a moment before continuing. I wanted to ask you something, she said, her voice a little more serious now. The letter I gave you, the one from the business group. I'm not sure if you ever thought about it, but I've been working with them. They've helped me get back on my feet too. I've started working again and things are looking up. But now I want to do more. I want to give back in the way that you gave to us. The restaurant owner was puzzled. Give back? What do you mean? I want to help you, she said. You've helped me when I needed it the most. You've given me a second chance, and now I want to offer you one too. There's a program that helps small businesses expand even further, and I've been talking to them. They might be able to help you grow your restaurant even more than you've done already. The owner couldn't believe what he was hearing. After everything that had happened, after everything he had gained from the partnership with the business group, now the woman was offering to help him again? It seemed too good to be true. I don't know what to say, he replied, overwhelmed. I've been so focused on growing my business I didn't even consider asking for more help. But if you really think this program can help, I'd be open to hearing more. The woman smiled, her eyes filled with determination. I know it can. I'm proof that second chances work. I just want to make sure you get one too. For the rest of the afternoon they sat together, discussing the details of the program. The woman explained how she had reconnected with old contacts, people she had worked with in the past who were now eager to help. They were looking to support small businesses like his, ones with a strong community foundation and a passion for growth. The owner listened intently, realizing that the opportunities before him were even greater than he had ever imagined. By the time the woman and her granddaughter left, the restaurant owner felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world seemed full of possibilities, and he knew that he had the power to shape his own future. But more importantly, he knew that the kindness he had shown, giving someone a chance when they had nothing, had come back to him in ways he never could have predicted. He went to bed that night feeling a mix of gratitude and excitement. His diner was no longer just a place to serve food, it was a part of something bigger. And the people who had once walked through his doors, struggling and lost, were now a part of his journey too. As the weeks went by, the restaurant owner worked with the business program, expanding his restaurant, increasing his staff, and reaching new customers. It was hard work, but it was rewarding. And with each step, he couldn't help but feel that he was paying forward the kindness that had been shown to him. He never saw the woman and her granddaughter again, but he often thought about them. He hoped that wherever they were, they had found the stability and peace they deserved. They had changed his life in ways he could never repay. But perhaps, just perhaps, the best way to honor them was to continue sharing the warmth and kindness they had given him, one meal at a time. And so the restaurant owner's life went on. It was no longer just about serving food or building a business. It was about connection, about giving people what they needed when they had nowhere else to turn, just as he had done for them. In the end, that was what made all the difference. Months passed, and the restaurant owner's life continued to evolve in ways he had never imagined. His small diner had become more than just a place to eat. It had become a hub of community, a space where people came not just for a meal, but for a sense of belonging. He had expanded, opened a few more locations, and was working on plans to grow even further. The support from the business program had helped him establish a reputation for quality and reliability, and his hard work was paying off. Yet amidst all the progress, the thought of the woman and her granddaughter still lingered in his mind. He hadn't seen them in months, but it felt as though their presence had never truly left. He remembered the gratitude in the woman's eyes, the way her daughter had held onto her side like she was the one keeping them both together. It made him wonder how they were doing now. Were they happy? Had they finally found the stability they needed? Every so often he would catch himself looking toward the door, half expecting them to walk in. But they never did. Life had moved on, and so had he. But that sense of unfinished business remained, a quiet ache in his chest that wouldn't go away. One evening, as he was closing up the diner after a long day, he saw someone standing outside. It was dark and the streets were nearly empty, but the figure was unmistakable. The woman, she was standing on the sidewalk, looking at the restaurant with a mixture of hesitation and hope. She wasn't alone. Her granddaughter was beside her, and both of them looked different, though still familiar. The restaurant owner felt his heart race as he quickly stepped toward the door. He opened it, and the woman turned at the sound. When she saw him, her face lit up, and she took a cautious step forward. "You," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "You're still here." The owner couldn't find the words at first. All he could do was nod, his own feelings a mixture of surprise, relief, and something deeper. A sense of closure, perhaps. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said, his voice hoarse. "How have you been?" The woman smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there the last time they met. "We've been doing better," she replied softly. "Much better, actually. We found a place to stay, and I've been working steadily now. It's not perfect, but we're getting there." The owner took a deep breath, trying to hold back the overwhelming feeling of gratitude that was rising inside him. "I'm so glad to hear that," he said, his voice sincere. "I always hoped you two would be okay." She smiled again, but this time, there was something else in her gaze, a quiet understanding, a recognition of the shared journey they had been on, though it had been brief. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice wavering slightly, "for everything. You didn't just give us a place to stay. You gave us hope, something we hadn't had in a long time." The owner nodded, not knowing how to respond. What could he say to that? He had simply done what anyone would do, or so he thought. But hearing her speak those words made him realize just how much his actions had meant. He wasn't just a diner owner. He had been a lifeline, a point of contact in a world that often seemed indifferent to the struggles of others. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "I just helped." "It was nothing compared to what you've been through." The woman shook her head. "No, you don't understand. What you did for us, it changed everything." The little girl, now older and more confident, stepped forward, her eyes bright. "Mom says you're like a hero," she said, her voice small but strong. "Like in the stories." The owner couldn't help but chuckle softly at the child's words. "A hero," he repeated, shaking his head. "I'm just a guy trying to make a living." The woman put a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's more than that." "You didn't have to help us. You could have turned us away. But you didn't, and that's why we're here today." The restaurant owner felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't the kind of praise he was used to. He wasn't someone who looked for recognition. But hearing her say those words, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, made him realize just how much he had impacted their lives. "Thank you," she said again, this time more firmly. "You've given us a chance, and I'll never forget that." The woman then handed him something, an envelope much like the one she had given him months ago. It wasn't a business letter this time, but something more personal. As he took it from her, he could feel the weight of it, both physically and emotionally. "I'm not sure if this will mean anything to you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But I wanted to give you this. It's a small gesture, but it's my way of showing how much I appreciate everything you've done." The owner looked down at the envelope in his hands, feeling a sense of curiosity and nostalgia. He had never expected to be given anything in return for his kindness. And yet here it was, another offering from her. Slowly he opened the envelope, and inside was a photograph. It was a picture of the woman and her daughter, smiling together. They were standing in front of a modest home, and there was a sense of peace and contentment in their faces that he hadn't seen before. On the back of the photo, there was a note written in her handwriting. "To the one who gave us everything when we had nothing. Thank you for showing us that kindness still exists in the world." The restaurant owner felt tears welling in his eyes as he looked at the photo. It was simple, but it was a reminder of everything they had been through. It was a testament to their strength and resilience and the impact of a single act of kindness. He looked up at the woman, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't do anything to deserve this," he said. She smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did everything. You gave us a chance when no one else would, and now we're okay." I just wanted you to know." The moment hung between them, a quiet understanding passing between the two of them. He had helped them find their way, and in return, they had given him a gift far greater than anything he could have imagined, a reminder that kindness could change the world. "I'm so glad you're okay," the owner finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never expected to see you again, but I'm so happy you came back." The woman nodded, her eyes shining. "We'll never forget you," she said. "You've changed our lives, and we're finally able to move forward because of it." As they stood there, the restaurant owner felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. His life had been full of ups and downs, just like everyone else's. But in that moment, he knew that the most important thing he had ever done wasn't building a successful business or expanding his restaurant. It was opening his door to two people who needed help, and in return they had given him something far more valuable than success. They had given him the opportunity to be a part of their story. "I wish you both nothing but the best," the owner said, his voice full of sincerity. "I hope you find everything you've been searching for." With one last look, the woman and her daughter turned to leave. But before they did, the little girl looked back at him with a smile and said, "You're our hero." The restaurant owner watched them disappear into the night, the warmth of their words still lingering in the air. As he closed the door, he realized that this story, the story of kindness and second chances, was far from over. It would live on, not just in his heart, but in the hearts of everyone who walked through his door. And in that moment, he knew that no matter what happened next, he had already been given something priceless.